of the Waterfront Commission Design Review Committee to order. Tonight, we will be discussing the Phase 1 application for the public 9-hole golf course as one of our items. And we'd also like to touch back on some of the items we reviewed at the last meeting, discuss the status of some of the requests that we made and where they are in the process. And we're going to get right into it. So old business, I'd like to see if we have any comments on the meeting minutes from our last meeting that were distributed to the committee. Anyone? Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion for approval on the minutes from the last meeting. Motion. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. So I'd like to get to the first order of business, which would be a presentation regarding the proposed 9-hole development.
Thank you, Mr. Amoroso. To the honorable members of the Design Review Committee, as you know, I'm Josh Berlinski. I'm a partner with the firm of Darrow Everett, and I represent the applicant, Metacomet Property LLC, an affiliate of Marshall Development. The reason for our appearance tonight is twofold. First, we want to show the Commission the updates we have made to particular plans and renderings in response to the comments we received from this committee last month. Matt Merva of Boer Engineering and John Selly of Phase 0 Design will both be presenting these latest iterations. Our traffic consultant, Paul Bannon of Crossman Engineering, will then provide certain updates as well concerning the proposed off-site improvements and the corresponding permitting endeavors as it relates to traffic and traffic mitigation. I want to relay yet again our appreciation for the time and effort this committee has spent on this application to date. Your positivity, participation, and input has undoubtedly improved our product, and we look forward to showing you what we have come up with over the past month. As we have said since the beginning of this process, since before this application was submitted even, we welcome the opportunity to engage in substantive and constructive dialogue over this project and are grateful for the feedback we have received thus far. The second reason for our appearance has to do with the game of golf. Specifically, we are looking for this committee to issue a recommendation to the full Waterfront Commission for an approval of the 9-hole public golf course newly identified as Phase 1 in our application in the hopes of opening up this amenity to the public in the near future. As Paul Pisano of Marshall Properties will explain, the preservation and restoration of these 9 holes came about as a result of an ongoing dialogue between the city and the developer throughout the zone change process. In fact, the zone change, the resulting design guidelines, the corresponding modifications to the comprehensive plan, the feedback received from the public throughout, and the plans, studies, and renderings for this project, which have emerged as a result, are the product of earnest and good faith negotiations and deliberations throughout the land development process. This proposal generally, and the golf course specifically, demonstrate that real estate development can be at the same time revolutionary and responsive, comprehensive yet collaborative. In that spirit of collaboration, we have something really incredible to show you tonight. Something that you are responsible for as well, and in which you should have immense pride for your contributions. To speak in support of our request for approval of Phase 1, you will hear first from Paul Pisano of Marshall. Paul has been involved with this property and this proposal since day one, and he will provide the committee with a brief summary of how this golf course proposal came to be, what the developer has done in support of that directive from the city since the zone change, and most importantly, how the developer intends to operate the course this summer while all of us, the developer, the public, the design review, and Waterfront Popper, continue our work on Phases 2 and 3. We previously submitted certain plans that demonstrate this layout, and Paul will discuss them all in greater detail. After Paul, you will hear from Robert McNeil of Northeast Golf Company. Robert and his firm designed this golf course and will be managing it once it opens. Robert's pedigree in this area, as he will explain, is second to none, and the results of his firm's work at the property, some of which he is going to show you tonight, are simply tremendous. Obviously, since the course isn't open to the public yet, most people have not really had the opportunity to see what's been done to this course. It is awesome, and we can't wait to show it to you tonight, and hopefully in the near future, make it available to the public at large. As we wrote in our narrative accompanying the golf course submission last month, the last few months have been a difficult time for the residents of the city of East Providence, as infrastructure failures have made everyday life more challenging in several ways. The applicant is hopeful and optimistic that our proposal will provide both physical and emotional benefits and have a positive impact on our neighbors in a moment in time where it would be greatly appreciated. That statement holds true today, it will hold true tomorrow, and this phase of the development, along with the remaining phases that are yet to come, can hopefully play some small part in bringing about better days in these properties. Thank you for your time, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Merva and start discussing some of the updates to the project.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, Matt Merva with Bowler. I'm here tonight to just run through some of the site plan modifications that we had reviewed with you at the last hearing and talk about some of the positive changes to the plan that I think you're going to agree enhance what we've been trying to do here. I'm just going to start with, trying to advance a slide. Were you doing that or was that me? Can you click to the next one? Okay, and one more. And here we go. So a few of the things we heard at the last hearing, one of them, which was a great comment from Sarah, was about the entry drive coming off of Lion past the grocery store into our town center concept. We said we'd try to take a look at, is there a better way to bring that alignment in that could benefit the termination of that view down the entry drive as you approach that town center concept? And that's exactly what we've done here. And I'll zoom in on that in a second. I know it's difficult to see at this scale, but just want to run through some of the other general changes. We also talked about enhancing the pathway along Veterans Memorial to create more of a shared path that would allow for bikes. I believe we had it at 5 or 6 feet wide before. That's now an 8-foot wide path, and I'll highlight where that is in a moment. We also looked at modifying some of the garage structures that line our boulevard. It created some stepping and some interest there that I think John Selly's going to get into in a little more detail. So I will advance to the next slide, either myself or if you could for me. Great. So this zooms in a little bit on that realigned entry drive. And we can see we've actually shifted the entry about 50 feet away from the roundabout, further up Lion Ave, created a little more green space in that pocket at the corner. And then we bring the alignment in kind of a curvilinear fashion to realign and come in directly on center to that to the roundabout that lines up directly with the town center. It's at the expense of some parking spaces, which we think we can live with. We're down about 44 spaces from where we were on the previous plan, but have created some more green space at that intersection and near the roundabout to really provide a better gateway feature there. We've also, if you'll notice, along the boulevard that heads east from our internal roundabout, along the parking edge in front of the grocery, we've added some additional landscape islands beyond those that we had shown before. So there are about 7 more street trees in that zone that will really help to buffer that parking area more. So we've been able to provide some more buffering at that edge and realign that access to the grocery store and the balance of the project there. If you wouldn't mind clicking to the next slide. This is a view from Lion, looking down that more curvilinear entry drive. We've eliminated that center island boulevard feature, which allows us to compress the roadway width there and provide for a more aesthetically pleasing entrance at that entrance there. So this illustrates that. If you could click to the next one. This is a view looking from that traffic circle, the internal one, back up the curvilinear drive, the grocery store is on the right, Lion Ave is past you in the distance. Next slide. This slide just highlights where we see the bike traffic entering the site from the bike path. Again, the area in dark blue along Veterans Memorial Parkway, we've increased the width of our paving there so that we're gaining access for cyclists into the site where they would then share the roadway network with other vehicles. But we're really providing that transition zone along our park-like setting along that frontage to really welcome bikes into the site. In the blue circles, we're highlighting where we've accommodated bike racks for bike storage. So we just wanted to clarify those. They had been shown on the plans previously, but this highlights that in a little more detail. Next slide, if you would. And this just separates out that bike travel layer from the rest of those circulation pathways. Next slide, if you would. So this is a view along that Veterans Memorial frontage now with the wider lane for accommodating pedestrians and cyclists there, shared use path in that entire frontage where you see the blue dashed line in the plan excerpt on the left. Next slide, if you will. One of the other things that came up at our last meeting with you was the screening of the loading area at the back of the grocery store. And we had some great comments from Glenn on trying to possibly incorporate a wall feature or something to further provide screening. What we looked at was, I think one of the suggestions was maybe trying to fill up against that existing stone wall that's along Lion Ave. We thought that was a good idea. We did take a look at that. Unfortunately, that wall's not really a structural element. What we did look at was trying to raise up a wall at the bottom of that slope so that we have a 3.5-foot high wall up against the edge of the travel way for the trucks there down at the loading level, which allows us to bring all of the landscape up higher and create some berming. What you're seeing is the illustrative plan on the top, which shows where we would propose evergreen and deciduous trees. We're showing a fence along the property as well behind the proposed sidewalk on Lion Avenue. And then the plan excerpt on the bottom shows how we'd be able to berm up that grading and provide some additional elevation relief to further screen that area. So we're trying to incorporate some of Glenn's comments into how we screen the back of that. And the image on the upper right corner shows you kind of the end result of that, which we really do feel is providing a good buffer to that loading area. Look for the next. So that's just a blow up of the grading plan, and you can see where we've been able to provide that contouring that's going to provide some additional elevation really at the ends of the views in, and then along the sidewalk, you can see the fence line symbol behind the sidewalk. That would be a privacy fence, 6-foot privacy fence to further diminish views into that area. That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. And so this is a great rendering that John Struth did to kind of highlight how that berming could work visually. This is looking down Lion with the grocery store right as you're leaving the roundabout. Absolutely, go right ahead.
Just if you can go either the next slide or the slides before. How are so that's the back. Is that the loading area? And I guess how are trucks going to load? Are they going to have to back up into that? So the building that goes out? Is that something you know?
That's a great question. It's easier to see on the larger plan. If you wouldn't mind flicking back a few. No, that's fine. Okay, here we go. So a truck would pull past the loading dock and then back its way into it. And it can do that from either direction. There's 360-degree access around that building for the trucks to maneuver. So they're not trying to turn around back there. They'd come in past the dock, back into it, and then leave in the direction that they were heading. We've run the truck templates on this to make sure it all works with engineering practice, and it looks good. You bet. Great. We did start discussing EV stations earlier, and for the retail, we're fine with the meeting the code the way it is. For the residential, we're asking that we be able to defer 50% of the required EV spaces for future use by installing the conduit necessary to provide those spaces, but not necessarily designating EV-only parking. What we've found, just kind of anecdotally in other projects, is that sometimes the rate at which people are buying EV cars is not necessarily keeping up with the regulations we're creating to encourage them. And what ends up happening is you're designating spaces that'll be EV only, and it really takes away from your overall parking count. So we'd like the ability to be able to add those in over time as the market changes and more people are utilizing those EV vehicles. We certainly want to meet the demand that's there now, but we don't want to overshoot it to the point where we end up shooting ourselves in the foot from being able to provide parking for standard vehicles as well. So this kind of highlights where we're showing those, and this will be part of our mission.
Just so I make sure I understood. So the commercial areas, you're putting them in as
Yeah, I don't believe that was as big of the requirement wasn't as strong for the commercial areas, and we're able to meet what was in the guidelines for that. It's just on the
Excellent.
residential side, it's a little. Okay. Next slide, if you would. The other thing we talked about last time was we had some little diagrams of what these lights look like in the lower left corner of this plan. Understandably, that's not giving you a great impression necessarily of what they look like in real life. So we do have some images of those lights installed that are on the slide here. So just wanted to point out the various types and how they'll be used on site. Again, it's sort of a transitional style of fixture. It's got sort of a traditional look, but you're not seeing the light source, right? That's really just a framework. And essentially, the light source is up in that cap. And so all the light is directed down towards the street and pedestrians and not up or out really in any way.
They're all full cut off pictures.
That's right.
All the standards for pollution, et cetera.
Yep, and,
Okay.
and just wanted you to be able to see what they look like. More images of those various pole heights. This is the double fixture, and then the next one. These are sort of the standard parking lot fixtures that we use. They're just sort of they sort of fade into the background. They're not necessarily any particular style. They're just kind of a modern fixture with an LED light source that can be full cut off. Outside shields are easy to do on LED fixtures by the way they're programmed. So really shouldn't be any light.
And I'm sorry if it's in the details, but the plans, how many lights in total? There were a lot of dots.
Oh boy, that's a great question. I will count those up and get that to you. But there are a lot. I'll get you that number.
It looks well lit.
It's well lit. We've got photometric plans that were part of the submission as well. We haven't changed the fixtures out from what we'd submitted originally. Providing some more clarification, but the number of pictures, their associated photometric spread.
And I was just curious, and I guess with that said, this PowerPoint, will this be online afterwards? Will it be posted, or how does that work? Okay, okay, I'll just take a look after. Thank you.
Sure.
Please post that on the website or have Dominic.
Great, and I'm almost done, I think, and we'll just talk paving quick, and then I'll turn it back over to John Selly, who will then. For the unit pavers, we talked about providing some samples and colorations, and these will be kind of on a case-by-case basis throughout the sort of the amenity and plaza areas throughout the site, particularly in the town center zone. We really want to have kind of a richness of material in some locations where it makes sense, beyond just traditional asphalt and concrete, which we'll have some of on site as well. But for accent and places of gathering, this is sort of the palette of materials we're thinking about for those areas. The Overlook Plaza, the retail corridor, and the promenade that leads to that would be a unit paver like those you see here. We also discussed, if you click to the next slide, some of the vehicular areas, using a stamped asphalt potentially with color and texture. We understand there have been applications in the city where that hasn't worked great. We have seen it work successfully when that color is integral, or at least through the top binder coat and not just painted on the top. So really, I think if it's effectively installed, we really shouldn't have issues with that, and it can provide sort of the flexibility of a typical asphalt paving without kind of some of the maintenance headaches that you get from trying to use a unit paver or even a concrete in a public or private roadway. You get some heaving, you get pavers popping up. It can be difficult to plow. So we do see this as a good solution. We'll ensure that it's installed properly and that color is integral and not wearing away with the first set of tire treads that go through it. I've seen it done really well, and I think it could be well here. Next slide, and we'll turn it over to John.
Can I ask a couple of questions
Please do,
before we
yes.
go? If we go, can we get back to the plan that has the bikeway path along the boulevard? The trail, basically.
Sure.
And there is a rotary in that, a roundabout in that I don't quite understand. We go-
That's a good spot, right? Is that where you're
that
talking
works,
about,
yeah.
Sarah?
Mhm.
So that is a spot where we thought there might be a pedestrian spine that kind of comes into the site from that location. It doesn't have to be as pronounced as what you see here. It could be a simpler intersection, but offered kind of a chance for wayfinding, maybe some identity signage in there, maybe some seating, but something to make that feel park-like along that entrance, and then a place, sort of a node to draw people in down that pedestrian spine that connects up to the retail.
It just seemed, do I have this on? It seemed to me that that pedestrian spine that sort of goes east-west really wasn't very strong, that may not be the place to emphasize that as an intersection, basically. That, the idea of having some nodes within it that may have some interpretive signage or something like that may be relevant. But the roundabout there didn't make sense to me. Yeah.
It's fine.
I just
'Cause right
don't
now it
see
feels
anybody's,
like
I don't know why anybody is taking that east-west route. What, you're going from the grocery store?
And it's skirt the whole site along the parkway there. So it's kind of creating a spine where you can see it goes all the way off the page on the bottom. No,
Yeah. that-
no, but the
that-
roundabout connects to the vertical path that skirts along the parkway. So it's a place where if you were walking along there, kind of a place to stop, kind of reorient yourself and then introduce yourself to the site at that location.
Yeah, and it's
It may be
several
misplaced.
places to do that, right? Like, it's not like that's the only location you can get into the site, but it's certainly, it could be something. It could be kind of a note of interest that is a spot where people might want to stop. Especially given that the grocery cafe is down at the end of that building. There's probably going to be some east-west travel, along that crosswalk at that location.
You would think that someone who is on the bike path, on the Parkway bike path, who's coming into the site would come essentially into the site at that location rather than coming down further to the main entrance?
I think you're asking a good question. Can we move up a slide or two, the one that had all the paths for the bikes? It was either, this is it, right? I think that shows you.
Yeah, so let's see, now the blue is is bikes, okay. I don't know, I'm having trouble with that location, but if you can convince me, maybe you can't. I don't know. We've got- And it becomes a little more important, but it just isn't taking me into the site in a location I want to go down. I'd rather come down to the main entrance.
Sure.
Where there might be a little more room to do that and be a nicer way for it.
So it,
Yeah,
it
I
might be
don't-
overly done at that point. Just make a T like the other ones
would be
and,
fine.
and just get rid of the rotary. And then you don't play up that connection. It's just one more place to connect in along that path along the parkway.
And I don't see the
Point.
reason to worry about overthink it too much there. Another question, let's see, the changes you've made to the entrance road, I'm pleased that you have relaxed that. I think it will work.
Great.
The asphalt that you're planning to use as the stamped asphalt only in the area of what do we call it?
Yes, at that intersection that sort of demarcates the public from more of the private residential to the east.
I do question it. I'm not convinced that the material works very well, but it's just in that one location. It doesn't become any of the identification for the whole project in any
No,
way.
that's really the spot. We haven't introduced a lot of vehicular pavements.
I'm not sure it's necessary, actually. I think that by the time it fades a bit or at night and whatever, you're not going to see the difference anyway. So it's not so good. In terms of other sorts of site planning things, I am still, if we are in that area of the entrance into the residential, we've got a building that's closest to the grocery store that's, the buildings have numbers, I can't quite tell you. But it's the one that doesn't have any space for any trees along the roadway, because it's so close to the road itself. Is there any way of pushing that back to get another 10 feet or so?
Can we flip back to the color rendered diagram? Actually, one more.
There we go.
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
so you're talking about the orange building that's right
It's
by
an
the
orange
intersection
building,
that
yeah.
he's talking
Mhm.
about?
Yeah, it just seems jammed in. I think we could get a little more space there. I don't know.
I think we can look at that.
Okay, okay, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and as we're moving back and forth in slides, one more going back or forward, whichever one that had the blue lines is, so on the far left, that dotted blue line, that's the current bike path. And then to the right of that is the other path. Will they be connected at the bottom of the hill, or is it the expectation for folks to cross going back north.
Mind if I walk up in front? I have no issue. All right.
Maybe put a roundabout at the bottom. Turn them around.
There is actually. You can circulate all the way around that tent site and right back up. One thing I wanted to mention also on the site side, our civil engineer is not here this evening, but we have had this sewer line cameraed and inspected, and it's looking pretty good. We're getting the final report on that, but I think it was in pretty good shape. So that was pretty good news there. And if there are any other questions on site, we can get them later, or I can.
We have,
Just a couple more.
do we have anything from the archaeologist yet?
So we don't. We received our permit, or rather, PAL received their permit from State Historic last week, which was great and progress. And I am in touch with the Narragansett Tribal Office, and I've been working with John Brown and his Lieutenant Mark Andrews on the necessary agreements that are conditions preceding to the survey being conducted. And those negotiations are ongoing. They've been constructive. John and Mark have been incredibly patient, and it's been informative for us. So we're looking to have that wrapped up in the next couple business days. And once we do, the survey will commence right away. So we just got the permit, and simultaneously we've been working with the tribal office to wrap that up as well. So hopefully when we come back before a design review next month, if we don't have the results, we'll have a significant and substantive update as to how that lays out, because we obviously want to have that survey undertaken as quickly as possible.
And question to clarify, the permit is just permission to conduct the survey, correct?
Correct. So PAL, the permit gets issued to PAL to conduct the survey. They submit an application to Rhode Island State Historic. State Historic issues a permit saying, we reviewed your application, we approve it. They've approved it. One of the conditions to that permit is that the Narragansett Tribal Office participates in the survey process. So we are finalizing our negotiations with the tribe in their form of agreement in order to effectuate that properly. So the survey will commence as soon as the agreement is signed up. I think we're hoping it's a 2-week survey process, if not shorter. And if nothing else, while we may not have the actual results, Sarah, next month, we'll have enough information from the survey as well as the progress in confirming that it took 2 weeks, and we'll be able to give a much more significant and substantive update at our next month.
And does the area to be surveyed include any portion of the golf course phase 1?
It does not. So all the areas that were highlighted were from our initial impact assessment that PAL provided, that we submitted in connection with the application. And Rhode Island State Historic concurred with that assessment, that those were the areas that required a survey, the areas of highest elevations that we previously discussed. And so there was no request or requirement for anything other than those previously identified areas.
I know your expert isn't here tonight on archaeology, but if the golf course is approved by the commission, if phase 1 is approved, the golf course redevelopment, is there a possibility that the survey area could extend to any portion of the golf course? What would happen then?
There is not. So the survey areas are identified, and then there is canvassing done on each area. But the higher elevations themselves are limited in scope and shape. So even if it were the entirety of the highest elevations, it is still outside the golf course. And so the areas that were identified by PAL in their submission are only what we now call phases 2 and 3. So that's the entirety of the area to begin with. There was previous CRMC correspondence, as you may recall, and I think State Historic, that made note that an archaeological survey wasn't required on the golf course. So PAL only identified the area to be improved in their application, and then within that geography, only specific areas from which the survey is going to be conducted. So the golf course is neither part of the application identified by PAL or State Historic or subject to any potential discovery by virtue of the assessment.
Thanks. I appreciate that clarification. So just to put it together, it sounds like the DRC and the commission, we don't have to necessarily condition or consider the survey results for the golf course phase of the development.
That is correct. The survey has nothing to do, the archaeological impact has nothing to do with the golf course. It is solely with regard to the area of the property to be developed and improved.
I just got a couple of comments here. Just want to make sure, we've had extensive discussion on this over many meetings. So as these surveys start to take place, I want to make sure that the comments we receive from the public regarding the process, the appropriate people, all of the appropriate tribesmen, et cetera, are included in the process so that we make sure that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's and that we go through the proper process. It sounds like you already have, but I feel the need to make sure that the comments from the public are addressed again and that we make sure that we factor those into the study.
Sure. Let me just go over it one more time briefly, just for everyone's edification. So we had PAL conduct a site assessment, a visual site assessment of the property. During that site assessment, they identified certain areas on the site, on the to be improved portion, which we now call phases 2 and 3, of higher elevations, where there will be soil excavation, which is thus the need for a survey. And when we submitted our application in December, we included their analysis that said, we recommend conducting a survey of these areas of the property. Deborah Cox from PAL was here, I think, in February or March, and she went into that in detail. PAL then submits the application to the Rhode Island State Historic Preservation Office that says we propose Metacomet as a site of some significance from an archaeological standpoint. As a result of that designation, we recommend conducting a survey of these portions for the reasons I just listed. Then State Historic distributes that application to the tribal office, the Narragansett Tribal Office, and they have the opportunity to comment on the application. We received the permit without any adjustments to the scope or refinements to the scope. And one of the conditions to the permit issuance is that we work in conjunction with the Narragansett Tribal Office to make sure they have appropriate personnel on site and the opportunity to participate in that survey. We have to complete our negotiation of the agreement with the tribe, which I am spearheading. And once we do that, the survey will be conducted with tribal participation to whatever extent they deem necessary or appropriate.
Thank you for the recap. I know there's a lot of people here and it's important. So by having that recap, it's a nice kind of reminder to all of us on the process. So thank you.
And again, the tribal office has been extremely forthcoming. They've been easily accessible and they understand the significance of the project and they're, everyone's eager to participate. So we're hopeful to get that survey underway as soon as possible. As soon as we wrap up the agreement, we'll get on site.
Anybody else have site comments? I have a couple, but I don't want to jump in before, see if anybody else has a few.
I have a question about the bike path layout. As you see here, this is a very good illustration. We see areas for the bikes to come and go, and we also see the red dotted walkways. Are they, I might assume that they are identical, that bikes can go wherever people walk and people can walk wherever people bike?
Sorry. The intent would be that once you're in the property, that you're sharing the road. Bikes would share the road with vehicles at that.
Okay, they'll be on the road.
Sidewalks would be for
Okay, I see.
So the red sidewalks are essentially pedestrian travel, and the blue are for bike until you get to a roadway.
Very good. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one more on bikes. I think last time you were here a month ago, and it's only been a short time. I think you indicated that you're working with DOT with the bike path reroute. Any update on those conversations? Okay, and part of that second question to that is conversations with DEM also about the bike paths. I think I understand correctly, DOT owns the bike path, DEM maintains it. I know DEM eventually has a lot of voice in what happens with the bike path.
So on this portion of the bike path, DEM doesn't have jurisdiction. So there is the portion of the bike path that runs parallel to the tracks that if you go closer to Kettle Point, where you can actually see the abandoned railway track and ever down there, like that's the portion where DEM has jurisdiction. But the portion of the bike path that we're dealing with is entirely DOT purview, and Paul Bannon from Crossing will speak to that. We did provide an update there as well.
I just have one,
Just got a couple of follow-up. Oh,
I just have one little thing. One, I appreciate you guys looking at the Waterfront and, reworking that area. The only thing I have to ask is as you get further into it, just cut a few sections through it. I think it'll just help everybody understand exactly what.
Will do. Thanks.
So just a reminder on a couple of items. I don't want to get too deep into them here tonight, but do we have an update on the roundabout? Do we have an update on the traffic study? And do we have an update on the utility studies regarding drainage, gas, water, et cetera? And if we're not ready to talk about it tonight, that's fine. I just wanted to reiterate those comments from the previous meeting.
No, when I said Paul Bannon from Crossman was going to speak to that, what I meant is that Paul Bannon from Crossman is going to speak to that. And but I'll provide a couple of updates in that regard. So
Like we're going right to golf course.
no, I'm not.
We weren't. Okay.
We are finishing site
Okay.
plan
All right.
before golf course, Mr. Amoroso. So just to everyone's clear on the schedule, Mr. Selly is going to speak on the site plan generally, and then Mr. Bannon is going to speak on the site plan generally. But I don't want to steal his thunder, but I have some updates for you on the other items. So Jim Moran confirmed with PAR Corporation that they are amending their peer review to incorporate the Crossman supplement. So that is underway. We're hopeful for it any day. We are not in receipt of it. With regard to the stormwater peer review and the fire department comments that we received, we submitted written responses to Mr. Levy, I believe last week, and we are happy to resubmit them to Dominic so he can post them on the website, just so he can see our responses. So we are looking to engage with PAR on the stormwater analysis, and we also wrote a response to the fire department in response to their brief letter. So we'll post those send them so they can be posted on the website as well. The last question you asked for is, you asked for an update on some of the other studies. Mr. Bannon, one of the things he will talk about is we received that initial correspondence from DOT, and Mr. Bannon will go into details to the response he sent them. So you can see where that stands. And he has some other off-site improvement aspects as well that he can speak of with much better particularity than myself. And then the last thing I'll say is that we are still expecting an updated noise impact study based on the analysis that's being undertaken by our consultant. We don't have those results back, but we expect them soon. And when we do, as we promised the public and the commission, we will be submitting an updated noise impact study that takes into account like everyday operations at the site. And if and when there's a peer review requested of that, we obviously agree to provide that or pay for that, I suppose. And the last peer review is that Mr. Fazioli had previously informed us that his consultant, that he had engaged a peer review of the financial impact assessment. I don't know the status of that. Everything was within 30, 45 days. So we're probably getting close to when that's due as well. So that's the status of those reports generally.
Thank you, because you must be reading my list because I had the noise study on there. as well.
I feel like you and I are vibing right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Selly right now, and then Mr. Bannon.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, for the record, my name is John Selly with Phase Zero Design. Yeah, just past that. Yep, next slide. Thank you. So one of the architectural comments that we received at the last meeting was to maybe take another look at some of the residential buildings where some of the roofs felt a little bit out of proportion with the scale of the buildings. So we did that, and we provided this additional rendered view of Building A, which is the residential building directly next to the town center area. So this view is taken sort of in the town center area. looking over at that residential building A. And as we sort of digested the comment, it felt to us that it was particularly relevant where we had the hip roof kind of wrapping around the full ends of the buildings. So we took a look at all these buildings and we did a couple of things to address it. We both lowered the eave on the roofs, and then we raised the height of the hip roof. And then we also introduced some additional shed dormers that you can see along the sort of front side, but then also introduced some additional gables on those end caps of the residential buildings to really sort of break down that roof line a lot more than we had it previously. So this is a good sort of picture of what that looks like. We also updated the elevations that will be, they're included in the slideshow tonight. I won't belabor the point on each one, but they'll be included in the submission as we move forward. Okay, next slide. So Matt showed the breakdown of the parking garage buildings on the site plan. So we took a comment last time that the garage buildings felt a little bit overwrought, too much sort of high dormers that weren't doing anything for us. It was one single long building. So we broke that long garage building down into 3 separate buildings, stepped them back along the site so you get some relief along that boulevard as you travel along. Brought the height down. We still have some dormers to give you some interest on the roof lines there, but we tried to achieve something a little bit more humble than we had previously. So that's a picture of that again along the boulevard. Grocery store would be to your right side in this view, looking back toward residential building A and the town center beyond. And updated elevations and plans of those parking garage buildings. Next slide, please. Okay, we had a request to bring some physical samples for the exterior building materials that we're proposing for the project. So this is the slide on the screen is basically what you saw last time, but with some additional detail on the cedar shingles. But we did bring some physical samples here arrayed on the table in front of you. Hopefully most of you got a chance to take a look at those at least briefly before the meeting, just to get a little sense, a touch and feel of what we're proposing. So again, the hardy board plank siding and the clapboard siding, we have 5 different colors that we're kind of mixing and matching, but all kind of that cool earthy kind of neutral colors. Town center area using a lot of that cedar shingles to really give us that coastal New England feel. We have in the upper right corner, the Nichiha vintage wood is a synthetic wood grain material. We use that in some accents on some of the retail, some of the restaurant buildings, also on building A where we have a fitness center. So it's kind of an accent for a public entry type use. And we have a couple of stones proposed, which you see on the sort of right side of the slide, which are also on the table here. The stone on the left is an Aris Crafts cast stone product. It would be an adhered masonry material. So it's thin, it's lightweight, but it's also a good durable material. We're proposing that for use on some of the commercial and retail buildings where it's a cast stone that we can get in a larger face size. So it's 24 inches long. You can get 4, 6, or 8-inch heights on those. So it's a little bit more of a larger scale, a little bit more commercial feel. So maybe on the grocery store base, places like that. And then the cultured stone to the right of that on the slide is something we'd propose on the more residential filling areas of the project, maybe on the golf building or on the residential sort of used sparingly. A little bit more of a residential feel, a little bit more texture, a little smaller scale to that stone product. Okay, so feel free to any questions, or if you want to have a conversation after the meeting about the materials on the table, welcome to that. Next slide, please. So another series of comments that we had was to look at strategies for screening mechanical equipment on the roofs of these buildings. So to start with the grocery store, typically we'll have a parapet, and we'll make that a minimum of 3 foot around the perimeter. So that'll help to conceal any sort of regular size mechanical equipment. There will likely be some larger mechanical equipment toward the back of the store. So we are proposing a freestanding louvered mechanical screen enclosure toward the back edge of the grocery store roof to help screen any larger mechanical equipment that we might have. The next slide will show us a roof plan of the grocery store. You can see the screened area proposed on the sort of right side of that roof back toward the loading dock. Okay, so that's the strategy for the grocery store. We took a look at sort of a typological strategy. So we're not doing every single building here tonight, but we, took a look at one of each type and came up with a strategy that we would then apply to the other buildings of the type. So this next one represents the smaller, more residential scale retail buildings. This happens to be the building that is either a childcare or a retail as that develops. But in these buildings where we have a pitched roof with no flat area, it's likely that we'll have some type of a split system for HVAC, which means that we'll have a furnace or air handler elements inside the attic of those buildings. We'll use some of the high dormers or louvers to bring some air intake and relief into those attics. And for air conditioning, we'll have condensing units likely ground mounted on the back side of buildings, along with other utilities like meters, gas meters, electrical meters, things like that. Most of these buildings have areas that sort of feel toward the back of the building or would give us the ability to screen some of that equipment with plantings around the buildings. It's the strategy for the smaller ones. Next slide, please. So this building is the mixed-use golf slash food hall building. For this one, it did have a full pitched roof, but with some of the food prep that we anticipate in this building, we needed to carve out a little flat roof space to make sure we had area on the roof for air handlers and kitchen exhaust, things like that. So often when we have these types of pitched roofs, we'll do a kind of mechanical area well, if you will, on the back side of the roof where we'll carve into the pitched roof and get a little flat roof area with a rail or other types of screen around it. So from the front side of the building, you can't see that anything's back there. From the back side, you get a neat, tidy little place to put rooftop mechanical equipment. That's the strategy for this type of building. Next slide, please. And here's some updated elevations of that building. You can see that mechanical area well on the middle image, which is the back elevation of that building. So over on the right there is where that roof well is being proposed. Next slide, please. On the restaurants, several of these have flat roofs. So mechanical equipment, kitchen exhaust, things like that would be on the roofs of these buildings. We took a look at, this particular restaurant. If we have a restaurant back of house area on the right side of it here, that would be a good place for our utilities. And having the rooftop units, kitchen exhaust directly above the kitchen area would be necessary. So we'll develop areas on the roofs of these with parapets or screen walls around them to help shield that equipment from view. On the multifamily residential buildings, we're making use of that roof that we looked at in the original new rendering there. Those hipped roofs go up to a certain height, but then the center portion of all of these residential buildings has a flat roof area. So in general, we'll be doing distributed HVAC systems in these multifamily buildings. So we'll have an air handler in the units, but on the roof, we'll have all the condensing units for each of the units. So that flat roof area toward the center of the roofs gives us a great place to locate all of those condensing units. And again, with the height of that, the hip roofs above it, all those will be completely screened from view. And the rest of these slides are updates to the elevations of the residential buildings for those roof changes that I described in the initial rendering. So you can kind of scroll through these. I don't think we need to dwell on them, but they'll be in the submission package that we send in to be loaded online. So that's basically the update from the architectural side. I'm happy to field questions before we move on to offsite improvements. If there are any?
Okay, so I've got one question for you. Have you done any studies at this point with the flat roofs, in particular the grocery block, which is a very large flat roof, with the incorporation of solar panels in that area?
So it's a great question. We have, and I think I mentioned this last time, we have engaged Wozni Barber to help us out on the MEP FP side of things. So we're developing narratives for each of the buildings on the property proposed right now. So we're kind of in the midst of that work. Right now, we're certainly making sure that all of the buildings will be solar ready. We're going to build in the infrastructure so that, you know, as we sort of move forward here and make the final determinations on where and if solar is appropriate for which buildings, we will have that capability to tie them directly in. So we haven't decided yet exactly where that might go. Certainly with something like the grocery store, we'll have a tenant and it'll become a negotiation with them, you know, as part of that deal. So today we can't say for certain that we'll have it there, but we're certainly going to put in solar readiness for all of these buildings.
Okay, so ultimately there'll be some sort of a plan that kind of spells out what you propose.
Yes, and I think it'll evolve over time as we, you know, bring folks into the development.
Another question, as you started out talking about backs of buildings and putting some of the utilities in the backs, and Len and I were trying to find the back. Most of these buildings don't have backs.
It's a good point. Yeah,
Trying to figure out where these things go is something that will really become part of the landscape development, I suspect. But we need to spend more time on it, I expect.
yes, although has definitely been some work that's been done on that. And if you look at the utility plans that have been included with the submission, they do show utilities coming into the areas of the building that we think are best suited for utilities to come in. So granted, a lot of these buildings we understand have 360-degree designs, but there are facades that are less primary than others. So that's where you choose to bring the utilities in. If there's an area where we can get some landscape screening around it, that's where we put it in. So some of these drawings that I've shown today, we also added areas where the meters would be located. So that'll be part of the submission. We can drill into that kind of detail. You know, we have time to take a look at that kind of thing. But we are certainly thinking of it, certainly addressing the comments that we heard on that aspect.
I would like to thank you for taking our comments seriously and working with them. So once these are submitted, we'll dig into them a little deeper, probably have some more comments, but we do appreciate your time and effort in addressing our comments, our initial comments.
It's hard to hit everything in a forum like this when you're looking at a screen and there's a lot of little detail in it, but appreciate your.
Especially at the level of design we're at. So we're asking you questions right now that I know it's difficult for you to answer because you don't have a mechanical system even designed.
Right.
So, like, you know, how do you answer a question on what the units are going to look like when you don't know what the units are? So we understand that. So as long as you have a concept on how to screen them and a plan in place, you know, we can move through the process here.
And we're developing some of that detail as well, Steve, with the acoustic study that needs to be done. We're sort of, you know, needing to get to the point where we're selecting actual HVAC units so that we know what kind of decibel levels are going to come off. So we're making educated assumptions. We're talking with the client about what they want to see in these buildings moving forward. So we're making a lot of these decisions that would typically come later in the process right now. So we are working through a lot of it.
I understand. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments from the committee?
Turn it over to Paul Bannon.
Good evening, Board. For the record, Paul Bannon, traffic engineer with Crossman. I'll be brief. Josh already hit my big points on status. But as I mentioned at the last hearing, we had submitted our traffic impact study and our conceptual plan to the Department of Transportation for their review and consideration and discussion to get us started through the process. Since that time, they've submitted responses, comments to us, and we have certainly responded to those comments. There were only 6 that they made. Many of them were, I would say, guidance and general clarification questions on the design. So we've committed to all of the comments or requests as part of that, including, you know, bringing on additional experts in the fields of roundabouts and landscape architecture, is we had indicated at the last hearing. So we're just getting through that process, and as part of this, we hope to get from our response to them a letter back that will state that they agree in concept to what we've submitted to them, and that we can move forward with the final design at the right time. We can't get past this board, but you have a an understanding of where they, what their position is and what the process is as we move forward. To the final.
Did they comment on the historic nature of the parkway as part of that review? Was one of the comments part of that, or was that addressed in their response?
Yes, they had indicated relative to the scenic parkway in the process that we will have to go through. The main focus was providing the backup information to support the design as we move forward in the final design. Part of that is simulating the operations of the roundabout and the roadway. So we brought on an expert that has that experience with specialized software. It's called Vism. So that will simulate and model so we can show cars driving around a roundabout. It's a very detailed final design software packet. So as we get through that process, we're going to be providing that to the DOT, and we should be able to provide that to you. So you feel comfortable with the design as proposed will work for short and long term. Once we get to that point, we will then get that letter. That'll allow us to contact the Scenic Roadways Board and then get input from them in advance of us putting together the design for the formal physical alteration. So that's where we are with the board. And we hope to get comments from PAR and working with them to meet their requirements on behalf of the city.
So DOT is gonna give you a letter of general conformance once you get through these 6 items or whatever.
Correct.
And then after that, then you'll go before the historic
Yes, we don't
Highways Commission.
want to put the cart before the horse.
I didn't know if they were involved at all in the initial. Okay,
No,
that's fine.
they're not going to look at something that they may not have to look at. So they
Sure.
want to look at, initial guidance on what they would be looking for as we work through the final design. I've worked on, large projects like this, Amazon, Citizens Corporate, that required major infrastructure improvement. That's $10 million. So part of that process with the DOT, they want to be on board and part of the process because of the scope of what we do.
So once you get through this commission, and it kind of rounds back to ROD, DOT,
Well,
and you get the final go to.
The process is, once we submit the application to the DOT,
Mhm.
then they'll submit it to the Scenic Roadways Board.
Okay.
They are a separate board that then we will have to go before
Mhm.
with our plans that are being reviewed by the department and go back and forth with them on the requirements that they want to see as part of the process.
I'm not trying to beat you up here. I'm just trying to get an understanding of the process so that we can see how this is going to affect the overall approval of the project and whether it has to be phased and how the approval of this factors into our review of the project as a whole. So by getting this out to the public so they can understand it, I think we all get a better understanding of the steps.
Once we get that general agreement with the department and we get the proper approvals at this stage for the site, then we would move for our state permits.
Thank you for the update. Any other comments?
Paul, I've got one question. I think you kind of answered this previously. This roundabout is being designed not for its development, but also.
Correct.
So even though you're only going to be building it to, at this point, address the interaction with Lion, if in fact there's, assuming a provision for an entry on the other side, we'll see that all at once, even though this will be a phased realization.
Yes, we'll provide DOT with that future design, though it may change. But as we get into the design detail with that wisdom analysis and simulation, it'll show what our immediate needs are, whether they're a 5 or 10-year requirement. But sometimes DOT will design the ultimate roundabout, but scale it so it can be modified in the future. Say it's a single lane roundabout today, but it's wide enough where you just make some adjustments to it and it becomes a 2-lane roundabout. So that's the process we'll go through with them through the simulation of the operation.
Okay, great. So it really, it's looking at it holistically and then you break it down. Right. Great, thank you.
And just a question, I think it came up at the last meeting. You are coordinating with that other property. I think it's the Chevron property across, so you would need some of their property for the roundabout.
Yes,
I'm mistaken.
yes, we have met with them. They're in support and would probably be partners in the process because land from them is going to be required.
And in the process you described before, any expected timeline of how this would all play out? If you don't have an answer, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's just,
It's a big project. The permitting department with the DOT is understaffed right now. So I'm not sure how they're going to handle it. And that's when we get this letter, we'll sit down with them and say, how are we going to move forward? Because those other big projects, they weren't a typical physical alteration permit where you submit 100% plans and they look at them and say, okay, they're good. You treat it as a design project, a DOT project, and you submit phase reviews, like a 25%, 75%. So you can make adjustments as we move forward through the approval process. And that's probably the way we'll go because of the Scenic Roadway Board input. Yep.
Thank you for the update.
So that concludes our presentation as it relates to site plan updates. So we're going to move into golf. So this is great. And we're going to start with Paul Pisano from Marshall.
Maybe we can go to the next slide. Good evening. Thank you, Josh. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Paul Pisano. I've worked with Marshall Properties for over 15 years and have been involved with this proposed development from the moment the property was purchased in 2020. It is my pleasure to be with you once again to present the public golf component of our proposal development for the city and the committee. As I mentioned, I've been involved with this process from the inception. But for those of you that may have not been there from the beginning, I'd like to just take a moment and review how we got to this point. Prior to the zone change on the property, many renditions and concepts were put forward. As I look around the room, there were some of you there at the beginning, but I don't think too many of you on this committee took part and participated in that process. So I did want to just reiterate a little bit about some of the concepts that were put forth, the area of the development that we were proposed to develop, and how we arrived, if you will, at the complexion that we currently have here. Believe it or not, some of the initial concepts included buildings built on the area that is now designated for the public golf course. We had buildings that lined Lyons all the way to Fort Street. We had no public space that was offered to be given or deeded over to the city as we currently have now. And there were many, many discussions between us and the city council and the city with a lot of give and take. Finally, after about a year of negotiations with the city, we obtained the zone change in 2021. And thus created the Metacomet Waterfront Subdistrict. This zone change, as recorded, defines all uses that are acceptable within the property, as well as additional conditions of approval for the newly created Metacomet Waterfront District. Not only did this define the uses and locations, it also, in a very rudimentary way, divided the property into 3 distinct areas, which at that time were designated as areas A, B, and C. To begin with the area A, which is the actual 60 acres of the property that is designated to be developed, we have put forth an application that encompasses all the requirements, takes into consideration the design guidelines, and provides a proposed development that is inclusive of open space, connectivity from end to end and in between, multiple gathering areas, bike paths, and in my estimation, one of the most important aspects, which it connects the development and the east side of Veterans Memorial Parkway to the East Bay Bike Path. This area that I've just described, as you will see on subsequent slides, are the areas noted in our phases 2 and 3, and of which I would suggest that the majority of the use restrictions, criteria, conditions of approval apply to this general area of the property. The second area that was identified was Area B. Through discussions again with the city, the marshals so graciously have offered 9.6 acres of land that are fully developable, capable of being developed through the city for their use and open space. And that is depicted on all of the plans we've put forth as Area B. Finally, Area C, the subject 40 acres of deed restricted area along the cove that we've designated to be a public golf course. This area, at one time, in the beginning of our discussions, believe it or not, remained as just open space. One of the concepts was in fact not a golf course. And I think that this is where, some of the dialogue about access directly to the waterfront or walking past was introduced. So that was at one time out there. However, for many reasons and concerns and positives, we contemplated all uses of this area that has been designated as Area C. Some of our reasons for determining that it was the golf course was we took into consideration, again, the vistas that you see, the views you see of this property coming from the south. I know some of you live in Kettle Point or areas south. And one of the things that always struck us with this property is that when you're driving north and you see that cove and you see that beautifully manicured fairways and green that have been continuously maintained, we felt that was a tremendous attribute to the property. And as we currently have it presented, that view and those perfectly manicured fairways will remain. And it will be the same view that has been there for the past 100 years. There were also other concerns that we had regarding just leaving it open space. So at the conclusion of our consideration, we concluded that we would like to put forth a public golf course in this area. Hence, we submitted an application that designates this area to be exclusively golf. So what you see in our presentation and what you see in our application is that this area, in our estimation, is going to be exclusively the public golf area. With that background, tonight I would like to speak specifically to our phase 1 in which we are seeking approval for, and the improvements required on the site in order to open and operate a public golf course on the premise this summer. When I conclude, I'm going to call up Robert McNeil, as previously indicated, who's our current course architect, who designed and helped implement these improvements that occurred last summer. And he's also going to be our golf course operation manager. As you will hear, Robert has a wealth of experience, has been within the golf community here in Rhode Island, New England, nationally and internationally for many, many years. So with that being said, if we perhaps can advance to the next slide. So many of you had received the golf course supplemental submission that we're looking at now. We submitted this last month to the commission. What I'd like to do is call your attention to Plan EX01, which is the phasing exhibit, and briefly give a review to make sure that everybody understands what we're looking at here. Phase 1, as outlined, is intended to roughly delineate the area in which the golf course is going to be operating. This area represents the area that has the right to be used for the public golf exclusively, as outlined under the Metacomet sub-district. The proposed improvements, as defined on the subsequent slides in this packet, EX03 and EX04, which we'll look at, are the proposed supporting accessories to support the golf in the Phase 1 area. It's important to note that Phase 1 scope includes all necessary elements required to operate this course. These elements include, but are not limited to, starting shed, ample parking, restroom facilities, and we'll take a look at that in greater detail in just a moment. So Phase 1, as it's currently shown, is synonymous with that area C that I previously discussed. That is the area that's deed restricted and will remain green for perpetuity, I believe. The new introduction of Phase 1A was created to the fact that we have an existing maintenance building on the site in place that currently operates. Phase 1A is an area designated for the future maintenance building, but because we're capable of utilizing the existing one for this season in the same capacity it's operated for the last 100+ years, we've opted to put the future maintenance building and those improvements into its own separate phase that can be adequately vetted and discussed. We do realize that a permanent structure is going to require more scrutiny and discussion than some of the other structures that we're putting forth in this Phase 1. So as an effort not to lump everything into one and try to push this through, we wanted to take a step back. We wanted to be reasonable, and we will address that, and we look forward to bringing you details on this once the due diligence is complete. Couple notes on this. 1A, as I mentioned, is not required for this season. However, we would like to commence, and we are going to come back to you with the appropriate information to push this forward, because Phase 2 cannot commence without Phase 1 being almost complete or complete. The existing maintenance building resides on the property within Phase 2. So in order for us to move the earth and so forth, we really need to have the maintenance building in place so we can move everything and so forth. So there is a little bit of a logistics there with the way the different phases relate to each other. Finally, Phases 2 and 3, which were previously Phases 1 and 2 under our original submission, represent the 60 acres in the area that has the right to be used for any of the uses permitted in the Metacomet Waterfront subdistrict. And again, that was Area A when we received the zone change. You can go to the next slide. Slide EX-02 is just an existing condition plan that shows the orientation of the curb cut and the parking and the area in which the old clubhouse was located. If we go to the next slide. So slide EX03 basically overlays the proposed golf operation on the existing condition plan. The good news is this current layout represents the golf operation that operated in the same way, in the same manner that the old Metacomet Country Club had operated for 100 years. I'd like to specifically note that the existing curb cut off of Veterans is once again utilized. The existing parking field will be rehabbed, restriped, and ample parking will be provided and accessible to the public. The past clubhouse and the bag drop is repurposed within the same footprint as the old clubhouse. This area will also include, which we can look at in more detail, a new starting shed, a tent restroom facility for the players. So why don't we take a second and take a closer look? If we could move on to slide EX04. So what we see here is, again, the original layout where the original clubhouse had resided, the turnaround. And what we're proposing to do is introduce a new starting shed as indicated, a 20 by 20 starting shed. That would be a temporary structure, but there, a tent to provide shade and an area for the players to sit, maybe have a soda pop, maybe have a hot dog or something after their round. But more importantly, there's not a lot of shade out there. So it's important that we're able to provide some area of shelter, whether it's raining or 100 degrees out or what have you. That is the intent of that setup there. In the back, there's going to be a restroom trailer that will be serviced and adequate for patrons that come and play golf. And also there's other areas to stage the golf carts, not only when they're going out, but the return and the servicing of the golf carts. Now, the only structure that's going to be put there is that starting shed. And as I mentioned, we're proposing a 20 by 20. It's there to take transactions, to collect greens fees. There'll be some minor golf-related retail, but whether it's golf balls, golf tees, golf clubs, there'll be drinks offered there and packaged catered food for the public. There's no facility here to prep the food, if you will. Much like some of the other elements, we have been in discussion with Rob Walker. We have provided him plans on what we intend to construct there. He's doing an initial review. We've spoken to the fire department, and there'll be a building permit pending very shortly with him when we get his comments back. If we go to the next slide, I can just show in greater detail just how basic this building's going to be. You have a small transaction window, you have an office, and then you have a small retail area, as I mentioned, for the accessories or golf-related retail sales. The next slide will indicate basically what you're looking at. Very traditional cedar shake, transaction window under a small overhang. And again, this will be a seasonal structure, and it will reside there until such time we can commence with phase 2. And at that time, we will come up with the plan to relocate that. And finally, we can end here. This, again, shows the layout of the course, which we'll discuss here in further detail shortly. But before we do that, I didn't know if anybody had any questions.
Anyone on the commission? I think we can go to the next step.
So with that, I'd like to introduce Robert McNeil.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert McNeil, golf course architect, golf course operator, golf course player, golf course person, period. My whole life. I've been building, designing, operating golf courses for over 35 years. Worked all over the United States, built over 200 golf properties, but I'm right here from Saunderstown, Rhode Island. So it's pretty special that we've had an opportunity, and thank you to the Marshall Properties family and team to save this golf course. I've been honored to play the golf course when it was in its heyday, and was certainly honored to come here when they gave me the call to try to bring it back in a way that's historically relevant and very special here, I believe, for the city of East Providence. If you want to start, there's take the next, there's a video here. We can talk a little bit about what's happened out there. Well, take a look. Yeah, this is an unbelievable golf hole. Look at this. This is beautiful. This will give you a sense of what's been happening out there. Sure, start it over again, because I have a lot to say in there. Yeah, if you can start it over, that'd be great. We get the better gist of it.
Layout into one of the best and most fun 9-hole experiences in the country. The routing at Met Links takes the player through some of the polished original Ross holes and green complexes while blending in a few new holes that both get your juices flowing and blend into the historic fabric of the property. The charm of Met Links will stick with players as they yearn for another go at this wonderful East Providence gem.
Architect from the 20s and teens and 30s that built over 400 golf courses around the country and world, and is probably the most highly regarded golf course architect in history. I've renovated and restored many Ross properties, and this one was as exciting as anything I've ever come across. To be able to bring his plans, his original plans onto this property and restore, and I use that word not lightly, we restored, we took the bunkering, we took the elevations of a lot of the features on the property and put them back exactly where they were in 1925. And enhanced it to the strategy and the game of today as well. But we've got, I think, 9 pretty darn good golf holes within the existing routing and footprint that was there before. So we kept everything pretty tight. The golf course, I would call it a ribbon of golf. If you play this golf course, it's very walkable. We'll have carts out there, of course, but it's a golf course that once you play it, you'll see that we, from a character standpoint, connected every hole together. You know, normally when you play a golf course, you play a golf hole, you get off the green, you walk, or you're going to the next tee, which is 50 yards away. Here you're walking off the green, you're on the tee. You're walking off the green, you're on the tee. It's a ribbon of golf. It's a very unique character and element we could integrate here, and we did that. Golf courses like this, like I said, are becoming very popular throughout the country. There's a course down in Orlando called Winter Park, which is incredibly successful, sitting in right in downtown Orlando. Worth a look. I think this is going to be just as good. This is, to me, and hopefully for you here in East Providence, this is a national story. This is a big time restoration national golf story that can be told and a product that can be shown to other parts of the country to say, hey, we have a recreational amenity here right in the middle of your city that we can bring back to life. Here, it's got all these other historical amenities that were part of it, but we're already talking about it nationally. This will be recognized nationally. So you will be very proud of what you have here once we get off the ground. We're hoping to open this summer. I mean, with the approval of obviously the commissions and everything in place. The golf course is ready. The beauty of this property here somewhat is that, Marshall Properties has done a tremendous job in supporting the quality of the golf course. This is second to none. This is a golf course that is as good as any private club in this market right now. I'll put it up against any private golf course in this market, and there's some darn good ones right here in East Providence. I'll put it up against them. It's going to be that good. So they've done a good job in keeping the quality level very high. And when the golf course opens, people will see that. But it's a public golf course too, which is a little different than these other golf courses here in East Providence and throughout the state. So it'll be available to the public. And we're excited about that. So we're hoping to get this property opened up this summer. And, we'll be operating the property right from the get-go. We've been working closely with the marshals from the beginning and going through a lot of the processes and getting a golf course really from scratch at this point to an open, active facility. So we're excited about that. Everything is ready. I mean, everything's in place, and the golf course is being maintained by Paul Jamrog, who was the golf course superintendent at Metacomet Country Club for many, many years. He knows the property like it's his own child, and he treats it that way. So you're going to have something here that's very special to a lot of different people that have been part of the property for a long time. And I'm sure there's pent up demand for this property as well, given its history. And we're here with open arms to let those people come and enjoy the golf course. Oh yeah, let's go through the pictures. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. I can talk a little bit about these pictures as that's so what happened there is essentially holes 1, 2. And if anybody knows the golf, if you don't know, that's going to be gibberish what I'm telling you right now, but I'm going to say it anyways because it's just going through my head. So holes 1, 2, and 3 are exactly the same holes that they were, restored completely to their original design. Hole 4, and this has nothing to do with the picture you're looking at. Hole 4 is the old hole 7. Hole 5 is half of the old hole 8. Hole 6 is the other half of the old hole 8. Hole 7 is new. Hole 8 is the old hole, the old 4th hole, and this is the 9th hole, which was the old 5th hole. So that probably means nothing to you what I just said, but that's what happened out there. We've kind of stayed within the existing quarters of the old golf course and created this new routing. So this is the old 9th hole, which is a quintessential architectural gem that Ross created on many of his golf courses, called a plateau green. Just sits up there high, and this is the finishing hole on the golf course. Go to the next slide. This is kind of an overview. You can look back through the city, and you're looking at the 5th hole from up above, looking back towards the city and then Providence. Skip that one. There's a 9th hole again. It is a pretty hole. This is what I'm talking about when I say a ribbons of golf. So this is the 3rd green. You're playing from your left, and that's the 4th green. And there's a ribbon of fairway that connects the two together. So you're gonna come around and play the 4th hole after you play that green. So that's 2 holes in one. It's the new 5th hole. So it's just anybody that played the golf course, this used to be the 8th hole, and it's where you hit your drive. And then it turned to the left, and you played over the ravine to the green over there. So this is now 2 holes. So that's the 5th hole right there. We're pretty proud of this hole. It's pretty neat. It's a short par 4. And the 5th hole, you can see both. I'm calling this, I think I just came up with this on my way here today. I'm calling it the horseshoe. So it's holes 4, 5, 6, and 7 playing a horseshoe right around the corner here. So that's all the holes. So this is playing over the ravine. This is the 6th green, looking back to the 5th green. That's the seventh hole, which is a new hole, which we played to an old green. We rebuilt an old green. The other thing out here is we used everything on site. We kind of used the old golf course to make the new golf course. So we had old greens, we took the old greens and made new greens with the old greens. So everything's old. Everything's old again. That's the seventh hole. Again, that's kind of a little bit better drone view of the horseshoe over the top. And then back to the ninth hole again. And this is the iconic second hole. So everybody kind of sees this as you come down Veterans Memorial Parkway. We had a lot of iterations of this hole, but we ended up with the original hole. It's the second hole. It's a par 5, plays over the cove. We just restored the bunkering to what it was in the 20s. We put it all back together, and there it is. It's kind of looking back from that green. So it's done. It's awesome. And any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions about the golf course.
So we appreciate your attention, deep
Sure.
history, trying to preserve the site.
Yes.
Doesn't look like you took down many trees unless they were.
Not many.
So is there any questions from the commission here?
Just what's our role now with the golf course, I guess, being part of the design review? Is there any direction for us on that?
The DRC is still making a recommendation to the Waterfront Commission, but the recommendation at this point will be limited to phase 1, which is the golf course redevelopment.
So we're going to go to public comment after we discuss this. Are there any comments?
I'm not sure I can put this into a question that makes much sense, but have you been working with DEM about the edges of the cove, the vegetation along the cove and keeping, go ahead.
That's actually CRMC jurisdiction. And we have our assent that we received last year for the golf course. That's good for 3 years while we do all of our work. So the plans were submitted. The assent was submitted as part of our application. All the golf course renovations were contemplated and approved. And I'm happy to resubmit it for the record, but we have the only state approval that's necessary in order to operate the course.
Thanks, because you just anticipated my question. If the Waterfront Commission approves phase 1, the golf course redevelopment, no further state permits are needed?
That's correct. So no further state permits are required to operate the golf course. That's correct.
Has CRMC seen the planting plan?
Seen the planting plan? They saw, I don't know if the planting plan is submitted in connection with the golf course, but their assent only dealt with the golf course renovations, which we submitted the plan set for the golf course, and that's what they approved. So the golf course, so there's no further need to go back to CRMC to operate the golf course.
Has all the earthwork been completed in connection with the golf course redevelopment?
It has been. It has been for some time.
You describe a number of structures that are going to be put into place. Are they finished in process, being prepared to create them? The office and the entrance buildings, things like that, the tent? Where are we at with that?
We have a contractor we're working with, and we've had multiple meetings with Rhode Island Energy, Cox Communication to power and provide communication to it. We met with Rob Walker. We provided him the plans. And we anticipate getting a building permit relatively soon, provided we get approval here.
You kind of already addressed this, but I just want to kind of restate it so everybody's on the same page. All of these structures that we're talking about are just for the interim operation until phase 2.
That is,
They all go away.
that is correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So just one thing to touch on is the 1A. So we're probably going to get some comments on that, but it's not going to be part of this year's project of phase 1. but we would encourage whatever comments you may have, so we can have those discussions now. So that we don't put that off, because it does sound like they will imminently be submitting on 1A, because it's going to hold up phase 2. So if you do have comments regarding that from the commission here, I'd like to discuss those now.
I guess as far as the 1A portion goes, I would like to see more information about exactly what's being proposed within that district. And also understand if there's any ability to pull it away from the adjacent residential lots. I understand there are limitations with the layout of the holes, but it would be nice to create a slightly increased buffer.
We intend to submit an additional supplement with regard to 1A. So when it comes time to, when we are prepared to ask the commission and thus this committee to make its corresponding recommendation, there will be a corresponding submission from the applicant in furtherance of the 1A request. So we're aware of the concerns that have been raised regarding the structure to be there, and we've done some work on it. The whole reason that we segregated it from the balance of phase 1 is because we knew it was a working process. So completely understood. We're not going to ask this commission or this committee to make a recommendation, I think, that hasn't been fleshed out. We have further materials we're going to submit rather, and then we look forward to the dialogue, whether it be next month or shortly thereafter on 1A, but we understand there's work to be done there.
I agree with Glenn's comments. If it can be moved up and away from those residential lots, I think it would go a long way to being friendly neighbors.
And I guess, I mean, even as you start to envision it, if in some ways you kind of think about this the way we had the discussion about the back of the grocery store, if in fact there can be some earth sculpting that really provides almost like a mini linear hill that really isolates this from the adjacent property.
So I'm probably going to defer to Paul in 1 second, but so absolutely we will. It's a little skewed from this standpoint, right? Because all the residents are looking down on it due to its elevation. So I just want to say that we're happy to model some sculpting right there, but it's not going to effectuate the same purpose that, for instance, that rear yard is, because you're at a higher elevation from the residential thing. But your point is well taken. It's definitely something we should consider to the extent it can benefit the surrounding areas.
I would just briefly add to that, the structure that we're proposing there, we're working with our architect and engineers, and it's going to resemble more of a residential nature building with cedar shakes and a typical pitched roof, very much in line with the other structures in and around it within the neighborhood. And we're really excited to show you that when we have all the information together.
Could I just a question on 1A? So what you showed us was the temporary, I guess, utilizing the existing parking where folks would go and pay for the day and so forth. And so 1A will ultimately be that'll be the permanent location, the parking and so forth, or no? What is it?
The 1A is going to be the location of the permanent maintenance building exclusively.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to open this up to public comment. What I would like to ask is that we do plan on continuing the discussion on the main development to the next DRC meeting. So we'd like to focus the comments on the golf course structure at hand, and so that we can move through this process effectively. And then at the end, I mean, if we do have some time, we'd like to entertain, some of the comments that we've talked about before, but if we can focus on the item that's foremost at hand. So whoever's first and like to come on over, make sure you give your name and step up to the microphone, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Candy Seal. I am here representing Keep Metacomet Green. We're here to talk mainly about walking paths on the golf course. We will reserve any comments on 1A until further designs are submitted You have our comments on our opposition to 1A as it is planned now. It is Keep Metacomet Green's position that paths must be provided within the 9-hole public golf course. The 2003 East Providence Waterfront Special Development District Plan on page 14 under General Land Use Goals calls for fostering a mix of commercial, residential, and recreational uses along the waterfront, giving priority to public access and recreation and water-related activities along the water's edge. Further down on page 14 of the 2000 plan regarding the expansion and enhancement of waterfront access, quote, create year-round public access to the waterfront via integrated multimodal and intermodal circulation routes to the waterfront. The current East Providence Comprehensive Plan on page 12 states that a purpose of its natural resources plan is to maintain public access to coastal waters and landside coastal water bodies that provide potential scenic vistas and observation points. The comprehensive plan then states on page 120 that a natural resource goal is to preserve and expand public access to the city's waterfront for passive and active recreational activities. An objective to achieve that goal is to require pedestrian access to the waterfront as part of a private mixed-use development in the waterfront areas. As a condition for approval by East Providence City Council to rezone the Metacomet site, Condition 7 states, the property owner will integrate paths throughout the development constructed and maintained at their own expense. To achieve the rezone, Marshall Properties accepted that condition. Paths within golf courses, although with risks, can be achieved successfully and safely. The American Trails Organization in the early 2000s identified a number of successful golf course walking trail collaborations. The Grand Forks Greenway Trail in Grand Forks, North Dakota, the York County, Pennsylvania Heritage Rail Trail, the Iron Horse Trail / San Ramon Royal Vista Golf Course in Dublin, California, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel / Half Moon Bay, California, among others. And in our written comments, we've given you a link to that article. More recently, the Seconic Greenway Trail and the Newport National Golf Club. We've given you a link to that in our written comments as well. If paths are not included within the golf course, the only public access to the waterfront will be by golfers who pay for the privilege and those enjoying community benefits for the use of the course, such as the high school students. If paths are not included within the golf course, there will be no public access through the golf course to the waterfront during the off-season, October through April. The Development Commission's website states under approval process that the development team meets in a series of design workshops with the design review committee and interested members of the public to review and revise as necessary massing, height, and design details. Had the public been invited to these design workshops, Keep Metacomet Green would have attended and pointed out these facts during the pre-application stage before Marshall's application and plans were finalized. The issue of paths within the golf course would have been discussed at that early stage and not at the final review stage. Prior to a public hearing several weeks ago, KMG approached Mr. Pisano and asked him whether Marshall Properties would be interested in discussing paths within the golf course. Mr. Pisano declined, but suggested that such a discussion might be more appropriate later in the process. KMG calls upon Marshall to commit now to a discussion at a future time to study and analyze the feasibility of paths within the golf course. KMG calls upon the Design Review Committee to commit now to recommending the Waterfront Commission that paths throughout the golf course be studied and analyzed at a future time to be determined. To make it clear, we realize that the Design Review Committee most likely will vote to recommend to the Waterfront Commission that the golf course be approved. We understand that. But we hope that you will take into consideration that walking paths throughout the development, public access to the waterfront is extremely important. And we hope that you will take our comments into consideration. And as part of your recommendation to the Waterfront Council, the Waterfront Commission, that a study analysis of the feasibility of walking paths sometime later in the future, 6 months from now, it doesn't have to be right now, can be done. Thank you very much.
So while we do have a golf course expert here,
Yes?
I'd love to get your opinion on this. I played a lot of golf in my life, and I've never really seen a walking path on a golf course, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So, if he's worked on 400 golf courses, I'd like your opinion. 150, sorry.
Are there walking paths on golf courses? Yes, of course there are. In those cases that you're mentioning, I've been to Secaucus, I've been to Half Moon Bay. I know exactly what you're talking about. Those paths are not in the golf course. They're approximate to the golf course. They're not in harm's way. So this golf course in particular, I understand exactly what you're saying. It would be very difficult to get to the waterfront without putting someone in harm's way. There's really, the golf course is sat right where it sits for 100 years. And you'd have to go through the golf course to get to the water. So the challenge here is just the risk to the walker. Can you get someone down there somehow? Maybe, but it's at their peril because golfers are inherently bad, and we don't want to get anybody hurt. And I understand the value of walking paths and whether there's walking paths within the development itself or other parts of the surrounding property. Within the internals of this, and this particular golf course is just, it's so small and tight that there's not a lot of room to hide walkers from harm.
Would we put up the picture of the second hole? The little L-shaped one.
Yeah, that was, go back a couple of slides. There you go, right there.
So is there an opportunity to get some waterfront access along the parkway side of that, where the hole isn't? So maybe a little bit of,
No,
no, because it's too
I mean,
tight.
there's
to the-
no, I mean, this
Yeah.
ball's
I'm
going
just
over
throwing-
that. This
just
ball's
throwing-
going over that.
I'm talking about the other direction.
The other,
This way.
where are you? On the road? You're standing on the tee right now, essentially. I don't, yeah, I don't know what's there.
Can we,
Right.
can we do an aerial shot or something that shows the overall course?
Of course.
Yeah, you can go back. Course layout.
Course
all the
layout,
way
yeah.
back.
I'm sorry, it's tighter than I thought. Sorry about that. So I mean, you could
The
extend
holes are on
path
the water.
down, but it's not going to get you to the water. So sorry
In the
about that.
entire area, I would say where holes 5, 4, 3 are in there is really not accessible to
No.
anybody to go in there. It's quite dangerous to go in there. So that, I mean, the hole 2 encumbers that waterfront. And that's pretty much all the waterfront on the golf course. That's it.
Obviously, there are a number of areas where there are cart paths all throughout the whole thing. Are cart paths anything different from walking paths? Is it something not to be done or is something to be?
Well,
considered?
those are also inside the golf course. So can you walk along a cart path? Sure, but the cart paths are also within harm's way of someone that's not playing golf and just walking on the property. I mean, we operate 4 golf courses right now, and we just do not allow people to just haphazardly walk on the golf course just because of liability and
Safety.
the
Sure, I
safety.
understand.
If there's areas that we have a course in Bristol that we have space, we've created a walkway that's not in harm's way adjacent to the golf course. But here, everything is so contained that it'd be quite difficult.
Paul, did you want to respond to the request?
Just wanted to add 2 points, if I may. To the north or above hole number 1, where we have that outdoor public space, we had a tent on the old tent green. if you take a look at the plan that Matt Merver presented with the walking trails and the bike paths and so forth, there are numerous walkways along the perimeter of the golf course, right, between the proposed apartment buildings and the green. There's a lot of areas for people to congregate and overlook those two fairways. So there have been some consideration to this, and we feel, or I feel like we've addressed it within the limits of the 60 acre. The other aspect I wanted to point out, because I've been dealing with trying to buy insurance for this operation, is that it is very expensive. This is a private development that we're opening to the public, but it's still the onus on us as the operators to ensure the safety and the insurability of our operation. And I know that would be a big hurdle if we introduce the public walking throughout the golf course.
Thank you.
So
May I respond, Mr. Chairman? The point of our presentation tonight, our comments tonight, was that we don't sit here in 5 or 10 minutes and try to figure out how this would work. The point was that the Waterfront Development District Plan, the comprehensive plan, and the city council condition in rezoning the property said that there must be public access to the waterfront, not just from a promenade where you're looking over the golf course and you can see the water in the distance. The public is supposed to have year-round access to the waterfront. Marshall Properties accepted that condition. If there are no walking trails, if the public cannot access the golf carts, there will be no access whatsoever through the golf course to the wetlands 6 months out of the year. We're not asking, as I said, for you to figure it all out tonight. It can be done. The golf courses that I mentioned, there are about 20 golf courses in the article from American Trails Organization. A number of them were public walking paths beside the golf course. A number of these that I mentioned are walking paths within the golf course. It can be figured out. It needs to be figured out. And I'm calling upon the developer and the committee to agree to discuss this in the future. Thank you very much.
You want to respond? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Well, will I have an opportunity to rebut what you're saying, Mr. Lewinsky? Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? I think you just made a comment with regards to 6 months out of the year. So you're speaking about like spring and summer and fall and so forth. And so in the wintertime, is it going to be open to the public or is it not? Also, golf's going to be open all year.
Golf will be open, similar to most courses. Golf will be open as long as the course is playable. So as long as you can play. So for instance, last year, it was very warm through almost December, but most golf courses in state Rhode Island were open through November, the minimum. And then actually never really got wet. Some of them played in January and February. Once they were able to open, they opened. So the off season this year, due to the lack of snow, was quite brief. So briefly, 2003 comprehensive plan did not contemplate Metacomet being open in the public in any way, shape, or form. That is not to say that it did not have certain mandates with regard to access, which our opinion is that we have met. The expert that just testified that walking paths in this particular area are not viable. We hear a lot about condition 7 for the zone change. I believe it's being taken out of context. I just want to read it in its totality for the committee right there, because I think it has a different context than what's being interpreted right now. The property owner will integrate paths throughout the development, constructed and maintained at their own expense, providing for connectivity between the property and the abutting neighborhood. That's the sentence. And we established walkways that effectuate that purpose. It goes on. These paths include pedestrian paths to both the parkway or access to the bike path, as well as to Pierce Field. The paths will be shown on the plans as approved by the city. The condition is not for walking paths through the golf course. The condition is not for walking paths to the waterfront. The condition is for walking paths that connect the neighborhood to the parkway. We have demonstrated from Matt's plans before, from both a bike and pedestrian access, we have established those access ways. Paul just mentioned the efforts that the developer made to provide access as close as possible without exposing the citizens of East Providence or the significant liability. Our position is that we have complied with the provisions of the zone change paragraph specifically that address this issue. If waterfront access is of the utmost importance to the city by virtue of the comprehensive plan and the waterfront plan. That is why, as part of our proposal, we are trying to effectuate a more streamlined access to the bike path, the water on the other side of the bike path, as well as do what we can to provide visibility to the waterfront. There are natural impediments by virtue of the layout of this course, which Robert attested to, that prohibit that from taking place here. But I just want to make clear, we're not looking to get around an obligation. That obligation is fairly clearly set forth. And I have multiple copies of that provision if anyone wants to see it. But you need to read the whole sentence, and you need to read that whole item to see what was intended by the council at that juncture. And that's all. And I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. Amy, do you have anything?
May I just conclude by saying the requirement is access to the waterfront, not visibility of the waterfront. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone next?
Before we jump in,
sorry about
and I'm going to show my ignorance here as a non-golfer, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding the context of this. Every individual that is golfing on this property, they're paying their fee to enter, it is in effect accepting legal liability for injury. Anybody that is just casually walking on has not signed said release for that one. Am I understanding that correctly?
They're also spaced out as players play.
Right.
People aren't just.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the legal issue.
That's correct.
Step up. Give us your name, please.
My name is Renee Chacoin. I was just wanted to follow up on a very passionate discussion that happened when we had our first meeting upstairs regarding the name of the property. And it was very passionately stated that using the word Met was like giving Metacom a nickname. And I believe that the applicant did respond during that session, and I guess I'm just a little surprised to see that the name is still the Met after that.
This commission has no regulation on the naming of the property. It's not in the guidelines. So it's not up to us to comment on what they call the property. I mean, we do have some objections, but that's ultimately up to the applicant to deal with. But from a commission, it's not in the guidelines, so it's not part of our purview.
I would add that as of right now, Met Links is associated with the golf course exclusively. So that is the only part that is officially branded as Met Links. The overall development, we're still going through the branding process. We understand the request to preserve Metacomet. We're taking it all into consideration.
Thank you. Someone else like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Heather Andrade from Keep Metacomet Green. I just have a few questions. Is that all right? Question, yeah. So I didn't get where Marshall's was with the land alteration plan. They've been approved? Like, do you need an okay from the Rhode Island Scenic Byway to do the entrance into? Yeah, this is what I don't understand.
We're using the existing access way for this interim period. So there's no DOT or scenic highway approval. But during this interim period, we're just using the existing entrance to the golf.
Well, what happens after?
Well, that's part of phase 2 and phase 3. We would have to get the requisite DOT and Scenic Highways approval to move the entranceway.
Okay, right, right. So when will that connect to the golf course, or where would that be? Where would, like that other entrance on Vets? Are we talking two entrances on Vets or what, just one? Just one forever?
Yes.
And the same one that's there now?
No.
Okay, so it's another one.
It's a new one. It's moving, correct.
Right,
It's,
right. So
so
you have to, so that's my question. Do you have to, the Rhode Island Scenic Byways,
highways.
roadways? Yeah.
The road commissions
Yeah.
have to approve that move of the entranceway on Vets. So both DOT and Scenic Highways have to approve that.
Okay, so will that affect the golf course? Will it be leading into the golf course? Is that,
I'm not,
do you know? Yeah.
yeah, we can show the site plan, but there will be, with the new entrance contemplate, you will still be able to obtain access to the golf course, if that's what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking that you wouldn't be able to approve a plan if you still needed a permit for part of the area, right?
I agree with that. So that's
Yeah.
why when we're asking for phase one, we've attached this interim plan that just shows use of the existing entrance until we obtain approval of the project generally, in which case we relocate the access and have new integrated.
But don't you
access
think
to
that
the golf
that's a very important project? I know you have it labeled out in different areas, but don't you think that taking up more land we should know about it beforehand, because you're going to be digging into more land and it is going to affect, right?
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just want to flip back to a previous plan. Can you click back to, sorry, yep, you were almost there. Go back. Keep coming. One more. Excellent. So this is a aerial photograph of what the course looks like
Mhm.
right now. And I'm going to come up and point.
Okay,
So
right. Right. So what happens so I'm still wondering why you wouldn't make sure that you have that other yes, for that other entrance before you,
with the commission, the DRC, to get the rest of the balance of the project approved. So we don't have approval to do any of this other work yet.
right.
So we're trying to take this as I'm sorry, thank you.
Oh,
We're trying to take this as a separate and distinct phase and just get golf operations going so that people can enjoy the course this summer while we finish up approvals and working with everyone on getting this the way.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah,
Does that make
thanks. 'Cause
sense?
I was wondering that, yes. And I do have another question. So, I think it was a couple weeks ago, there was some disturbance and chopping of the trees on Metacomet and on Metacomet and on Fort Street. And I was told that they're clearing the cell towers because they're going to be replaced. Is that true?
Yeah, that work along Fort Street was Rhode Island Energy.
Mhm.
And they hired Stanley, and we understand that some of those towers are going to be replaced. That's why they were so aggressive with cutting the trees around the base of those subject towers. We noticed a little bit further towards Lions, they weren't so aggressive with removing those trees. But the towers are eventually going to be a different complexion. I'm not sure when that's going to occur, but it will occur, I think, next couple of years.
Okay, and there's no, like, I'm not sure if you would know, I know when they put the towers in, they didn't really do a dig, you know, an archaeological survey. So what is exactly the highlands? Because that area is high, isn't it? Isn't that included in the highlands?
Roughly, if I were to put an area around it, it's the fairway adjacent to or that runs parallel to Veterans. Okay, because in that area, our design calls for that to be a little bit. And then the other area would be more center, as you mentioned, in the middle of it, more towards Fort Street, where again, the elevation before it goes into the big hollow is cut there. So there'd be two areas of the major disturbances. The rest of it, it doesn't get dug down at all. It's actually in those areas.
So when they, but when they find something, if they do find a body, then everything stops. Is that true?
There are protocol and procedures. That's why we hired a professional. to
Right.
deal with that, and
Right.
Follow those. protocols.
Yep, great. And I also wanted to mention, so I also heard when the cell towers, you know, when they were doing that destruction, I also had heard that they, from the source, that they were putting up, they were also mingling them, you know, putting these two projects together, the cell towers, clearing of the cell towers and putting up the wiring for that utility shed. I got it from the horse's mouth, so. The utility, they were wiring, they would have poles on Fort Street.
Oh, the three-phase coming down Fort Street, the replacement of the utility poles on the street, not
Yeah, well, they,
overall transmission.
yeah, they said for the wiring for that, for the
Yes.
new,
Yep.
maintenance,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's more for the tapping of the irrigation system, which is going to occur on Fourth Street. We have a permit through the East Providence Public Works Department. So there's going to be a new tap to feed the new irrigation system that was installed. That particular tap is supported by a pump, VFDs. That entire complexion requires three-phase electrical service. That three-phase service only runs so far down the street. So we've engaged and we're under contract with Island Energy, and they are bringing that infrastructure to the point in which we're going to tap that water line. It's going to occur within the next week or so. We have all approvals from the city. And again, that is just the utility supporting the function of the government. That's all that is. And we will eventually divorce ourselves from the existing tap that's out there, which is a benefit to the city because that complexion is not so desirable. And in the future supply of water for the overall development will be new taps. And we are concluding that hydro study with our engineering. We hope to have that in the next week, and then we will be in a meeting with Dan and the Public Works to run through the findings of that report.
Okay. Can I just ask this is just, so who is really in charge of the waterfront district? Who is in charge of the Metacomet land? Are you guys in charge? Is the waterfront commission, like when something goes wrong and you know, I speak to somebody, is it the waterfront commission or is it the city? Because now we need building, they need building permits.
As far as
Well,
what?
you know what? Because, well, the little incident with the destruction on the Metacomet land and Fort Street.
Do they have a permit to do that work?
They didn't, you know what? Rhode Island
Sounds
Energy
like
did not know that there was any hint of an archaeological survey going around in that area. So that's what I'm wondering, like, who's in charge of that?
It's not the commission.
Well, who would I speak to about a problem?
I would talk to the town, to the city. You got to talk to the building department, public
Well,
works.
I
I
will
mean, we're commissioned here to review the guidelines for development. We're not
Right.
here to enforce what's going on the
Right,
sites.
no, that's what I'm asking.
So I would
I'm asking.
I would approach the city and please just grab a microphone. Yeah.
Sorry, showed up late, so I don't have a seat. So I'm not sure I follow the question. Can you elaborate a little bit more? I mean, Rhode Island Energy has the right to trim trees around their utilities.
Right.
They own the easement, or they have,
Correct.
easement rights within that utility to protect their assets.
Right.
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 So I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, it has to do with the survey, the Highlands, the cell towers. There was never any,
I mean, you'd have to talk to Rhode Island Energy about when they
Yeah.
put those in many years ago.
right. But
I-
so does nobody think that having an archaeological survey on that area and the tree trimming, working in that area, do you not think that
Well,
they should be there? Because I really don't.
tree trimming is a lot
Tree-
different than digging up earth.
Yeah, well, I mean, who was paying attention? What did they do? Do you know?
Brought tree trucks in and trim the trees.
Right, but I mean, they chopped the trees, they pulled up stuff from the ground. So, I mean, that is destruction of the land, true? And does that count as the Highlands? That's my main question.
That I can't speak to. I'm not sure where those trees were relative to. I'm assuming you're referring to the archaeological
Yes, yeah,
areas that
yeah,
the applicant is looking into, correct? I don't know where those are relative to
Right.
that, but
Those transmission towers do not fall within the footprint of the proposed development, so it's totally outside the perimeter of the prescribed archaeological study.
okay.
Ones are long.
So what is that, because of the,
Because we're not disturbing it.
you're not disturbing the land? But is that part up there though? Is that considered the Highlands? And if they did find a grave or a burial,
It's an easement on our property, and eventually about 90% of that easement's going to be on the city's property once the area B I described gets deeded to the city.
Hmm.
So there's
we
only a
get the
very
sense of
small.
towers, yeah.
And as Dan indicated, anything associated with the work in those transmission lines is really the full responsibility of Rhode Island. And it's up to them to negotiate and or put in, agreements in place with
Right.
everybody. It's not our responsibility. So I would recommend, if you are concerned about that, get a hold of Rhode Island Energy.
Oh, I did. That's who I talked to. That's who said that they
You're
had
doing
no
better than
idea.
me, because getting a hold of them is very difficult.
Oh, I have a number.
just to add, we've had extensive meetings with Rhode Island Energy regarding the tree work that they were doing
Yep.
in those areas.
Yep.
In an effort to save as many trees as possible and not, cut the trees to a point where they, would either die or
Oh, they did,
not be
yeah.
viable. So,
Yeah.
but at the same time, to argue that point, Rhode Island Energy has the right and the need to supply our city with power. So if they are not protecting their asset, then, and we lose power,
Oh, no,
we'll be in the
totally
same
get that, yeah.
situation.
I'm just wondering, like I said, the Highlands, I consider that the
yeah.
Highlands.
Well,
Okay,
I can't speak to
yeah,
that.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dan Bodwin, and I live at 48 Kettle Point Avenue, East Providence. I didn't realize we were going to get a great update tonight. It was terrific to hear all the new information. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for asking questions about all of these studies that yet have to be done. The one question I have, and then I'll get on to the subject of the night, is Crossman's response to RIDOT. Is that going on the internet? I haven't seen that as of today. Is that something, is that going to continue to go on?
We're happy to provide that. We can get Dominic everything in the next couple business days so he can.
Thank you. I just want to explore two ideas. One is not new. This has nothing to do with your action tonight. We know, I don't want to delay it. I mean, it's a great golf course, no question about it. But there are two ideas. One we talked about, is there any kind of potential for some walking areas in that golf course? And the reason that I'll continue to bring it up, despite all the facts that have come out tonight and all the challenges, is that, and I have not had the privilege, other than, when did we go out on the land? A year and a half ago, I think it was. It's been a long time, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been a long time to really see it. So you're just kind of looking at it overhead. But when I look at holes 4, 5, 6, and 7, I guess that's that horseshoe that you were talking about. There's a lot of land in there. And you look at how golfers are going to hit it one way, another way. There's a lot of land that is not going to be involved in the golf. Now, it's a wetland, a lot of it, but having a nice walkway through a wetland is often very educational and done often. And I would just like to say, without putting it to bed tonight, why don't we do what Keep Metacomet Green has suggested? Let's just do a little study, a little further study, particularly that one area, because there's a lot of land there. And you've done a terrific job on a golf course, by the way. I can't wait to play it. It's just beautiful. But that area, there's a lot of land there. And I just would like you to endorse just looking at that and say, okay, well, maybe there's something here. Liability, people get around that. There are different ways you get around that with signs or whatever. Where there's a will, there's a way. Just study a little further. That's one idea. The other idea is to try to connect the development to South Broadway via a sidewalk on the eastern side of the Veterans Memorial Parkway. It would involve extending the buffer zone a little bit further by Marshall to the golf course where it stops interfering with the golf, and then you'd have to bring it out to the street, and that would involve RIDOT, DEM, the city, whomever, to create a path there that people can be safe and can have just a nice experience getting to the development for your customers, for your residents. Because right now there's a large neighborhood off of South Broadway to the south of South Broadway. And try to visualize, how do I get to this great development if I want to walk, if I want to bike? The way you got to do it is you got to go all the way down to 4th Street, which is a half a mile from the Veterans Parkway, come all the way down 4th Street, and then maybe down Lion Street. Or you got to cut through Kettle Point, go to cross Veterans, cut over to Kettle Point, go down the bike path, go over the vets again. There's no direct way. And having a nice sidewalk there would also bring access to the pond. And it would have to be a combined effort of the developer, Marshall, the city, the state, et cetera. But I think it's something that should be studied. And maybe it's already been studied. I don't know if the planning department has looked at that or others, but it seems that we really need something that's safe and enjoyable there on that side of the vets. Those are my 2 ideas for study. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Linda Lee from Riverside. I would just like to say what I said last time about in the wintertime, you could go walking on the golf course. I'm sure I'd like to know if he thinks that would hurt the golf course. I go to Goddard Park. I go cross-country skiing all winter. It's beautiful. People love it. It is supposed to be public. So that's my comment.
Thank you. We have any other comments? So at this time, I'm going to close the public meeting, the public portion of this meeting, so that we can talk as a council here. So we have this proposal in front of us here regarding the golf course. I'd like to see if we can get comments from our committee here regarding this, so that we can see if we're in a position to make a recommendation tonight.
I think, and we've already discussed that there's a lot of information to be looked at for phase 1A. But I feel that the presentation by the applicant for phase 1 proper is pretty cut and dry in terms of opening this asset to the community. So I'm comfortable with proceeding on phase 1, and phase 1A will be addressed at a later date.
Are there any other comments from committee members? No? No? Okay. The biggest issue that we see here appears to be the walking paths. So would the applicant consider a meeting at a later date, a future date, as recommended, to discuss this in greater detail?
we would agree to discuss this in greater detail. We do not agree to a formal study as to the viability of the walking path. Because we have Mr. McNeil here, who in his expert opinion has alluded to that. We are happy to have a discussion. But if if the city wants to commission a study, if if the KMG wants to commission a study, that's all good. We are happy to have the discussion. And we will sit down in a public forum to talk about it. Not behind closed doors. We will sit down in a public forum and talk about it. But we don't believe a study is warranted, a separate study is warranted, due to the fact that we've made our presentation. We've got the expert here who testified as to the viability of it. Study would concur with that assessment. So we're happy to have the dialogue going forward, and in a public setting, we'll talk about it. But that's really the extent of the obligation.
Thank you. Give me 1 second, please. So I'd like to call for a motion to, for the approval of the Phase 1 only golf course, subject to the applicant having a follow-up meeting to discuss walking paths. And subject to further discussion on Phase 1A. And the client has already agreed to submit additional information on that. So I'd like to call for a motion.
Just one question. I don't know if you want to specify in terms of timing when the discussion on the walking path should occur relative to this summer or the submission of the application for Phase 1A.
Sure.
We will, a couple things going on here. We'll agree to meet on this by the end of the year. But I need to be clear, and I would ask that the commission make it clear that your recommendation does not tie that discussion nor the Phase 1A submittal to the approval of Phase 1. We agree that Phase 1A is to be discussed and approved later. We agree to have a dialogue by the end of the year, but we just also want to make clear that Phase 1 and the interim operating plan is approved along with those other two conditions. So no disagreement there, just for clarification's sake.
Whether I was saying that correctly, that's what I meant. So we do have an attorney here helping me out.
So this would be this motion, if it passes tonight, would be a recommendation to the commission who can then incorporate or not. They could choose to incorporate that as a condition if the commission approves Phase 1.
So, yeah, to clarify that it is just a recommendation to the Waterfront Commission. So let's try to restate this. So it would be a recommendation for a motion to provide a recommendation to the Waterfront Commission for approval of Phase 1 only, with the provision that there'll be some additional discussions had regarding the walking path, and that the applicant will also be submitting additional information on Phase 1A, which is not part of this approval at this point. So I'd like to call for a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Sorry, this buttons drive me nuts. So I don't think we have anything else on the docket for tonight. So I'd like to call for a motion for adjournment. Actually, 1 second. Before we do this, I know, sorry, I don't do this every day. So we are going to continue the discussion regarding the Phase 1A, Phase 2, and Phase 3 to the next DRC meeting. Date to be determined because we have not publicly advertised that yet. So that long explanation there. Now I'm going to ask for a motion for adjournment.
That's a motion.
Oh, man. So can I get a motion to continue this to the next DRC meeting?
Motion to continue.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right. All approved? All right. Anyone against? All right, motion passes. Now, motion to adjourn. I apologize for this. This is, so now I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And second, please. Second. All in favor?